Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. It's Monday, November 4th, 2013, and I'm ready to cover some different types of news, including some Haarp weather modification news along with the economy. But I'll also be getting into the usual war on terror, liberty, sovereignty, Middle East news at the end, so kind of cramming a lot in here. The Category 1 winter storm is expected on Tuesday into Wednesday across the plains to upper Midwest. This is from November 4th from the weatherspace.com. It says a low pressure center over southern Nebraska will move northeastward through Iowa and Wisconsin, bringing gusty winds and snow conditions across parts of the plains of upper Midwest Tuesday through Wednesday of this week. So Category 1 areas are west, north, northeast Nebraska, southwest, south, and southeast South Dakota, parts of northeast Iowa, southern Minnesota, northern half of Wisconsin. And lastly, it says a good 4 to 6 inches of snow is likely in these areas with 20 plus miles per hour wind gust. As far as the chemtrail forecast, this is it. This is actually for Monday. Most of you will probably be seeing this on Tuesday. But this is what it'll look like on Tuesday as far as the major focus is up in basically the upper peninsula of Michigan, northeast of, southeast Canada, northeastern part of the United States, basically. Whatever aerosols were being sprayed in the southeast mostly dissipated, but by Wednesday, you have a huge front of aerosols coming into basically the west coast and northwest, moving across the country into Thursday. Apparently their network went down, so they won't have it up till Saturday, but they say that this is from 11.3, the current or last detected long-wave data, basically Haarp status. And the yellow in the basically the central part of the country in the west coast indicates a low, medium to moderate pulsing, and then of course you have the building frequency right here. You've probably heard of stuff like this before, these big companies trying to patent certain things, including now genes, people's genes and DNA. The Nestle company tries to patent the fennel flower. It's called Nigella sativa, more commonly known as the fennel flower. Has been used in a cure-all remedy for over 1,000 years. This has been now Nestle is claiming to own it and filing patent claims around the world to try to take control over the natural cure of the fennel flower and turn it into a costly private drug. In a paper published last year, the company's scientists claimed to, quote, discover what much of the world has known for millennia, that this extract could be used for nutritional interventions in humans with food allergies. But instead of creating an artificial substitute or fighting to make sure that the remedy was widely available, Nestle is attempting to create a Nigella sativa monopoly and gain the ability to sue anyone using it without Nestle's permission. Prior to their outlandish patent claim, researchers in Egypt and Pakistan had already published studies on the same powers or curative powers that Nestle was claiming. They said that it had done this before in 2011. They tried to claim credit for using cow's milk as a laxative, despite the fact that such knowledge has been in Indian medical texts for thousands of years. Many Americans are still optimistic about the way things are. Yes, they feel powerless, but at the same time, they'll convince everybody that it's their duty to vote and support military operations wherever. And right here it says Americans say America is still number one for now. It says who Americans believe will be the world dominant economic power 5 to 7 years from now. The U.S. says 43%, less than half of those polled think the U.S. will be the world's dominant power. Said over 36% of those polled think China will be the world's dominant economic power. It says that the U.S. Is actually number one by wide margin. Their GDP is twice China's, and when measured on a per person basis, the U.S. has an 8-to-1 edge over China. But again, it's just like politics, to me personally, I think that most of the world economy is kind of managed. Then all we're seeing now is an East trading bloc and a West trading bloc. And who knows, maybe someday we'll see a central trading bloc in Africa in the Mideast. But something else too, China is actually, I think they passed the U.S. for the biggest oil consumer or importer. And right now, the U.S. actually just hit a milestone. They became the biggest oil and what was it? Oil and natural gas producer. So something I thought about today is, why would the powers that be give the economy as far as producing things, industrialization, that to China and India? And I thought about it. I'm like, well, all those two countries make up, not a majority, but a good majority at least of all the world's population, most of the people. And maybe it's they didn't want to give one nation too much power because they'll have some self-determination, but also it actually is used as a form of population control. When you think of kind of post-industrial nations, such as the United States, you can see that well, I don't want to say indigenous, but at least in Europe, let's just use Europe for example, the indigenous populations there, they have become more technical and stuff like that. Their birth rates are down. That's what I'm getting at, and they have to stem those and fill the gaps with immigrants. That's what they're doing. So instead of promoting the people there that are ethnic Germans to have more kids, they're just importing a bunch of people in places that they bomb. We're talking about, well, maybe eventually, Africa and the Mideast, but right now what they're doing is that they're bombing these people. They're creating refugees that will fill the gaps in Europe and in America. And if they're lucky, eventually, like in parts of Africa where it is getting better, they'll be turned into good consumers that will get a credit card and all that, and a car and a cell phone. And they'll get, of course, education systems, schools to brainwash them, and that's basically saying, well, you got to be better than China and the United States. You got to be the best. You got to be the best consumer. I saw this article because that just didn't sound right to me a little bit, but who knows? From March 23rd, by the time Obama leaves office, U.S. will no longer be number one. By 2016, title will be handed over to number 2, China. And there's this article here, how chicken got approval to process and export U.S. chicken. I've covered this before, but it says here that they're going to allow U.S. chicken to, that's raised there, to be sent to China to be processed and then sent back to America. And someone made a very good point. This is what big corporations in the United States and whoever these powers that be are. This is what they think of the American worker, the labor force in America. They're just gonna, it's because people want to think and hear that everything's American made, like your cars and all that, where the stuff's actually manufactured, the hard stuff, the steel's made, engines made, all overseas, and then they assemble it here and say it's American made. So your chicken will be American made, even though it'll be processed in China. So it says here that the USDA's food safety group, their task was to determine if China's processing remains equivalent to that of the United States, with the ability to produce, like it's all much better, but with the ability to produce products that are safe, wholesome, unadulterated, and properly labeled. This means that 4 poultry processors in China will be able to ship cooked poultry products to the U.S. The chickens will have to originate here, but it will also might be the first step towards a day when birds raised and slaughtered in China could fill dinner plates in the U.S. So that should be a very scary thing because they actually have incidences of bird flu out there in coming from chickens and that in China. And we covered this before. October 23rd of this year, China reports second H7N9 bird flu case in October. You also have the scientists tinkering with the bird flu, trying to weaponize it and make it mutated. And they're going to go ahead with that now. Scientists plan new, potentially controversial bird flu research. They want to understand how the flu passes between people. So kind of like how the scientist was searching or researching the bubonic plague, and he ended up dying in the lab. Obama wants global teams to create more foreign investment for the U.S. So, American made, right? He'll create new global teams led by U.S. ambassadors as a way to increase foreign investment in the U.S. economy with the aim of producing more jobs for the middle class. The last U.S. lead smelter closed shop. It says about 145 employees down there in Missouri will lose their jobs at the end of December because of the plant's closure. It says a Doe-run company said. The plant's operated for more than a century and is the lone remaining lead smelter in the U.S. Announced in 2010 that it will cease operations at the end of the year. It says the U.S. EPA said the company made a business decision to shut down the smelter instead of installing pollution control technologies needed to reduce sulfur dioxide and lead emissions as required by the Clean Air Act. So, this thing will screw a lot of people over. You go to the emissions for your car and stuff, have to, you end up losing your car because you can't afford the part. So they're really ridiculous about this, and they don't give a shit about clean air and all that crap. This is a strategic move, part of the economic warfare and redistribution of economies, really. I mean, the whole thing about a Clean Air Act, they're spraying fucking aerosols in the sky. You think they care about clean air? They give tax subsidies to companies who exploit and fraud people, but they can't help a company that's the last smelter here to keep going, so they can put them on some kind of program so they can pay this off and keep their company going. So some of this news is getting kind of recycled in here that I've covered recently, but I thought I'd just throw it in there. The U.S. is stopping to finance coal plants abroad. They're saying it's a huge shift. It comes after years of federal support for coal projects abroad, and it's a shift that could divert billions of dollars away from a cheap source of electricity that contributes heavily to global warming. Of course, that's a bunch of BS too, but they could create subsidies for better solar panels and whatever. But no, the people that put Obama in office, the energy companies, natural gas, they're going with that. And even if it means busting up the ground and contaminating water supplies, killing livestock, screw it, right? It's about clean air and clean water. And global warming being caused by chemtrails and aerosols and weather modification and Haarp. And Pennsylvania food banks fear effect of cut and food stamps. The food pantries and other organizers who are feeding the hungry are warning that they'll be unable to plug the hole being left by reduction in federal funding for food stamps. It's tight. The government now wants to have a budget. They want to stick to it, right? They want to be fiscally responsible. As Obama says, we got to get our fiscal house in order. A son of Blackbird, SR-72 March 6 reconnaissance and strike drone says, I wonder if everyone in the U.S. will be on food stamps by the time this thing takes to the air. So they're talking about this U.S. Air Force and Lockheed Martin coming up with this super drone. It's an affordable hypersonic intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance strike platform, and it could enter development in 2018 as a twin-engine aircraft designed for a Mach 6 cruise around twice the speed of its forebear and will have the optional capability to strike targets. U.S. nuclear upgrade over the next decade, $350 billion to $400 billion towards nuclear weapons. It says that modernization work of this kind is expensive, but there is no doubt that the investment is necessary. And really, the future, the future's all kinds of different types of weapons, including lasers, but kinetic energy weapons has been tested. I covered this recently, testing the advanced conventional precision warhead. The precision weapons used at hypersonic speeds. So, kinetic energy, projectile warheads. I saw this article, American NATO war game came close to provoking the Soviet Union into launching a nuclear attack. And the first thing I thought was what I just covered, right? 6,000 NATO troops try to intimidate Russia with an exercise from November 2nd, the largest strategic war game, followed by Moscow conducting a large-scale nuclear attack. I think this is propaganda here, but North Korea using Russian technology to create electromagnetic pulse weapons. I've heard this before, but they're just laying this out so when they carry out a false flag, they can blame it on North Korea. After the electricity grid goes down, or they can blame it on the Syrian Electronic Army. According to a new book, it says that last year Obama reportedly told his aides that he was really good at killing people, talking about drones. Speaking of drones in Pakistan, where they're over here trying to say stop drone striking us, they actually did it. U.S. broke promise of no drone strikes during a Pakistan peace talk. They were assured by the U.S. government that they would not carry out any drone strikes. The U.S. State Department shrugged off the complaints. Pakistan said that the U.S. murdered the peace talks. This is GGN and I'm Darko. Thank you.